Now, Pelane, good afternoon to you. I had to scratch my head on this one, but I think the ANC NEC was only 60 people until the Polokwane conference in 2007, extended to 80 then. Now, Premier Mathabatha says that's not working.
Once it in half, Stephen, and the 60s so seemed that there was the situation before the 2007 Polokwane. According to him, was already more than enough. So 40 would do the job. He feels that if the NEC was shorter, even was more smaller and more petite, in his words, it could be able to do the job. He says that decision making is a little bit of a tedious process. If a person raises their hand, particularly on a certain day, they may be able to speak on the second day, or if not the day after that, if it is a prolonged kind of a meeting. So it gives painting a picture there, Stephen, of a very tedious process that has to be followed in decision making. And he feels that with the struggling ANC as far as support base is concerned, having lost so much over the last elections, yes, from 2011 up to currently what we've seen in the local government elections, people becoming despondent. He feels that the better way to get that support back is to have a more unified kind of a structure, and a structure that is less than what it is, and particularly cutting it in half. 40 people, he says, would do the job as opposed to the 80 NEC members currently.
It would be quite a big change. I can imagine the fight over all of this. What else is he saying about unity in the ANC?
Feels that the unity of the ANC would only come forward once the people start rallying behind elected leadership. He's saying that because at the Vemba district, the ANC district there in the Vemba district last weekend, they elected their leadership and they were not taken to court. They feel that should be the way to go. But you do remember that 2 weeks before that, the ANC in that region had taken, a disgruntled group had taken the ANC in that region to court over the list issue, and they feel that this is at least a step in the right direction, and calling on the Sekhukhune region, of whom are also party to that particular ask to the court, really to set aside the list in the province. As the Sekhukhune region, there was some disgruntled members, and they feel that the unity of it will be sacrosanct, and it will be able to deliver some much needed unity in the area and some services. He talked about basic services, including water, and that only united ANC will be able to deliver that as far as the governance is concerned. So Sekhukhune is one of the strong regions of the ANC in Limpopo, having delivered a number of people to the provincial leadership, including Stan Mathabatha himself. We have Daniel Caesar, who's from there, who is the suspended treasurer, and we have Soviet El-Khanyani, of course, who's very much strong as far as that is concerned. He's from the other side of the Pitamkaba, but that in itself gives you an indication, of course, of interest. The interest lies in this effect, Stephen, as we wrap up, that going towards the provincial conference and the national conference, each and every single leader of the ANC who has some hope of becoming a leader will have interest as to who will be leading this. Of course, factions will remain. So if the so-called CR17 and as well as now the RET forces, they will be the ones who have more interest as to what is happening in those conferences, because they will say they will start to paint a picture towards the national conference that we expect to be held in December. Of course, that will be dependent on the NGC and as well as the policy conference, which are there, part of the policy of the ANC, that they are held before an elective conference. But of course, I'm sure an NEC, as the highest decision-making body of the ANC, will make a decision on that.
Pelane, obviously we've seen a lot of delays to regional conferences and ANC conferences, or political conferences across the country, really, across the world too, because of COVID-19. I imagine these are quite important conferences. Some of them will be delayed. There'll be a lot at stake here.
There'll be a lot of stake, but look, as much as we've seen the delay of regional conferences and provincial conferences, I would imagine that the ANC NEC would not want to delay the national conference, because there's already a lot of people who have very much a lot of structures of interest as to the outcome of that when it does happen. So the decision of the NEC, if it does happen that they do postpone, I would imagine that it will be met by a lot of people saying that they want a mandate, they want a renewed mandate as a matter of agency. Therefore, the conference should sit. But as I already put it to you, there's going to be a need for that NGC to sit unless the NEC decides that it is no longer going to happen. There's a policy conference that always sits before the elective conferences, in particular the National Conference, and that will also have to sit so that it can set aside the issues around the policy work of the African National Congress and talk about where they had failed and where they need to implement as far as directives to their government employees. Very important policies, conferences, but will they sit? The leagues have to sit, the Women's League have to sit, the ANC Youth League have already proclaimed that they will sit somewhere on the 27th of March in the coming year. And once they sit, of course, those policy conferences and the NGC will have to sit, but those will be prudent from what we hear from the NEC itself when it does sit and eventually start talking about the elective conferences, the preparedness to it, and what will then happen. The renewal issue has been there, and whether or not that will still be the mandate of the branches and as well as the regions and the provinces going into the national elective conference.
Pelane Phakadi, thank you very much indeed for us live this afternoon, watching that conference for us as it does play out. That's the Sekhukhune conference of the ANC in Limpopo. Interesting debate there around the size of the ANC's National Executive Committee. It's a debate that's been had many times over the last 100 years or so. In